And coming up, we have 4 keynote speakers. Laslow Bock, he heads up people operations, and that is HR for Google. He'll share some tips for making work better, and the tips come not only from experience, but also from research for his new book, Work Rules. We have Sir Michael Barber. He is a lifelong educator and government reformer from the UK. He was chief advisor to the Secretary of State for Education in the UK, and later the head of the delivery unit for Prime Minister Tony Blair. Jenny Mugara is a former teacher and digital learning coordinator for Chicago Public Schools. She will tell us how to bring power to the pupil. And also Brittany Wenger. She is our final keynote, and she is a college student. As a high schooler, Brittany won the Google Science Fair 2012, and she'll show us what can happen when adults nurture the curiosity of a student. So important. So all that is coming up. Stay with us.
Hi everyone, I'm Laslow Bock, the Senior Vice President of People Operations at Google. I am delighted and honored and humbled to be here today with you, sharing what little we've been able to learn at Google and what we've learned looking at companies and organizations around the world to make work better. I had this epiphany a while ago where I realized we spend more time working than we do anything else in our lives. More time than we do sleeping, more time than we do with our friends, more time than we do with the people we love the most. And for too many people, work is just a means to an end. It's a way to make a buck, but it doesn't have to be. And there's ways to make work better and more meaningful and have more impact on the people around us, have more impact on the children around us, without actually spending a lot of money. One of the things that's been most exciting to discover is that most of the things that can transform work and education are actually free. I have a friend named Michelle Krantz, who's a principal at Santa Clarita Junior High School in Southern California. And she does this thing where she sits around with her staff, and at lunch, when they have a break or when they have a staff meeting, they go around talking about what everyone has done well. And all she does is she brings a box of Kudos bars. Kudos are these chocolate granola bars. They're called Kudos. And when somebody does something well, they literally are given a kudos, given a little nice word to keep them going. And many of the things I'm going to share with you today are similarly free or incredibly low cost, but can have a powerful, powerful impact, hopefully on education and on the experience our children have. The first and most important thing I want to share with you is the importance of giving your work meaning. Adam Grant is a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. It's a business school. They award MBAs, but he did research on looking at the impact of meaning on people's productivity. He worked with a call center. Basically, these were people hired to raise money for a college, to raise money for scholarships, for endowments, for things like that. And they were raising, on average, $1,300 a week. And he asked the question, what would happen if they got to know the impact of the work that was being done? So he went out to scholarship recipients and had them write a 1-page essay. And in that essay, they talked about, thanks to this scholarship, because of the money you raised, I was able to study Shakespeare. I was able to go to college. And what he found was reading those letters had no impact at all on the fundraisers, zero impact at all. And he thought there must be something wrong. So instead of writing about getting into school or being able to make more money or taking a class or two, he asked the scholarship recipients to write another essay. And this essay was about the impact they had on their lives, the impact that this college education had on their ability to see the world. So not I took a Shakespeare class, but the exposure to Shakespeare helped me understand humanity differently. It helped me master the English language. It helped me grow in a way that I never would have but for this scholarship. And the fundraisers went from raising $1,300 a week to $3,100 a week. A tremendous improvement. So Adam then wondered, what happens if I actually have these kids come in and meet the fundraisers? So we had them come in and spend just 5 minutes telling their story once a month. And fundraising increased to over $5,000 every single week as a result of that. And the lesson is, connecting to mission, to meaning, to your work being something more than just what you get through to get to the end of the day, has a powerful impact on productivity. In the teaching profession, you have an advantage over fundraisers because the work you do by definition is meaningful. But what's important is to keep consciously reflecting on that, to remember every day, even on the most frustrating days, and we all have them, that you're changing lives in some small way every single day, and that every single interaction, even if it doesn't feel meaningful to you, is meaningful to that child or that parent. The second thing we've learned that I want to share is you should never confuse development with managing performance. Chris Argyris was a professor at Harvard Business School, and he did a study of what happened to Harvard Business School graduates 10 years out. And what he found was most of them were stuck in middle management. And he thought, why is this happening? These were people who had every advantage. They went to the best prep schools, they went to the best undergraduate colleges, they worked at prestigious firms, then they went to Harvard Business School of all places. They should be ruling the world after their graduate degree. And he found they got stuck. And the reason they were stuck was that they were not able to learn from failure. What he found was that successful people rarely experience failure, so that when they do fail, their ability to learn shuts down and they stop learning and they get stuck in middle management. There's a very clear analogy, not just to how we manage our educational institutions, but how we work with students. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and the impact it can have on just telling children that you're able to learn more. Your mind will expand. You can be better. You're not limited by some innate level of ability. It's incredibly powerful to underscore that and make sure people feel that. But it's also important to allow people to fail, and students in particular to fail and learn from that. In Los Altos, California, there's a school called the Bullis Charter School. It's a public school, and one of the things they do is that when students take a math test, whatever their scores are, they're given the opportunity after the test to retake any questions they missed for 50% credit. They don't have to, but they can, and they choose to. And the retaking isn't coming in and sitting and having to take the test again. They take it home, they work on it with their parents, sometimes they work on it in class with their classmates. But it's an opportunity for them at their own pace to explore what did they do wrong, how can they learn from that mistake, and how can they get better. The Bullis Charter School, in part as a result of these practices, was the third highest ranked school in California last year. The lesson here is that failure actually isn't failure. It's the single biggest learning opportunity our children have. The next lesson will not sound revolutionary at first, but it's letting teachers teach. And what I mean by that is, if you look at corporate training, companies spend $150 billion a year on internal training and external training. That's a third as much as the entire US educational system spends. And we have very little to show for it. The results from the formal educational system, K through 12 and colleges, far more effective than what corporations do. But at Google, we do something interesting. We let our employees teach one another. We have a program called Googler to Googler. A Googler is a Google employee. And basically, we allow them to teach any course they want to anyone else in the company. So last year, more than 5,000 Googlers taught classes to other Googlers on all kinds of topics. Winemaking, history of the bicycle, but also on physics, computer science, how to give a presentation. Because the lesson is that your best teachers actually already work for you. Now, come back to the teaching profession. And there's some teachers who are exceptional at everything, but they're very rare and few and far between and hard to replicate. But if you look at almost any educator, there is something they're going to be superb at. There's going to be someone in your institution who is amazing, better than anyone at lesson planning. And someone who's off the charts at finding that one struggling student and making them better, and someone who's equally good at nurturing your very best people, and someone who's fantastic at finding the middle of the pack and making them better. So instead of saying, we're going to bring in outside trainers, and instead of saying, here's the best person, let's study them, let everyone teach. Make sure each of your teachers knows what they are the best at, and teach that. Let that teacher teach everyone else in your environment so that everyone becomes as good at everything as your best people are at what they're great at. I'd also suggest you don't trust your gut. One of the hardest things about being a teacher is you put a tremendous amount of effort into it, and you don't actually see the results right away. Sometimes it takes years to know if something you've done has a positive effect. And every year you're getting a new batch of students. The beautiful thing there is it's an opportunity to experiment, to try different things. And this is an area where the math and science teachers can help me out. If you're teaching multiple sections of the same class, try something a little bit different in each one of the classes. I remember I had a job when I was working for a company called General Electric, and there were 8 different business units underneath me. And I decided one year, one group, I would say no to on everything, and another one I'd say yes to on everything, and everyone else was in between. And I learned that being tough actually sometimes generates better results. It was an experiment I tried. I told my boss I was trying it, so I suggest you do the same. But as you have your multiple sections or multiple teachers teaching the same subject to one group, to one grade, I'd encourage you to think about what do they want to do differently, or what do you want to do differently in your sections, and consciously test that and try it and give it the time, the year, and see what the results are, and then go back and next year learn from what worked and what didn't. By doing that, you can get better every single year without relying just on your gut, your instinct, but by actually basing it on science, on facts, on what your experiment is telling you. The sum total of my teaching experience comes from a summer I spent teaching English in Japan and a few summers teaching summer school at my high school. But in Romania, before we came to the United States, my mother was a teacher, and she taught for years and years and years. And I know the impact a superb teacher can have on a student. Your jobs are tough because you never have enough resources. You have all kinds of family dynamics at home you have to navigate and deal with for your students. And your students come and start at a very different point for each single one of them every single year. But the work you are doing is the most important work anyone on this planet is doing. It makes my day job look easy by comparison. So thank you for the work you're doing. Please, please keep building our future. And I hope in some small way this was helpful.
Obviously, most education systems are large government systems. And so what I'm writing about generally in how to run a government applies to large government education systems. Actually, I think it applies to small government education systems too, like a small school district in the United States, or even, as I was discussing with a group of school principals, or head teachers as we call them here in England at the weekend, it applies at the level of a school too. So I want to take you through in a few minutes what the key lessons about running a government actually are. And lesson one is decide your priorities. So if you're a government and you want to improve your education system, what exactly do you want to do? What do you want the citizens to see different by the end of your term of office? The second lesson is, again, all quite obvious but requires discipline to do, is to organise your government to deliver the stated priorities. Generally speaking, what we've learned over the last decade as we look at governments around the world, and my book includes examples from every continent, is that by having a part of the centre of the government, if it's an education system, the state education agency, for example, in the US state, or in a wider government in the Prime Minister's office or the centre of the government somewhere, is to have an element of it focused purely on implementation and delivery. So not on policy and strategy, there are lots of other people doing that, but people who are actually making sure that these big things stated in the priorities are actually getting done. The third lesson is to have a well thought through evidence-based strategy. Whatever it is you're trying to attempt, whatever results you're trying to deliver, is your approach to delivering it based on evidence? Have you looked around the world for the best examples of education systems achieving the goals, the kind of goals you've set, for example? Have you looked across your own country? Have you looked at the best schools within your own system and seen what they're doing? Is there something you could learn from them that would apply to the whole system? So just to summarise, you've set your priorities, you've organised to deliver, and you've got your strategy and it's based on evidence. Then you need to do some planning. Eisenhower famously said when he was preparing the Normandy landings in 1944, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And the key elements of planning are what are the actions you're going to take and when you're going to take them and who's going to take them. Making sure that you know how the actions you're going to take will change the data. What's the trajectory? How will, let's say you're improving literacy, you know where it is now, you know where you want to get it. How will the data change over time? Routines. If you just do one of these things, routines is it. Government is driven by crises and events. There's all these things happening all the time. Things are going wrong. It's true in an education system. It's true in a whole government. But if you get routines built in that focus on the priorities, that check the data, that check the plans are being implemented, for example, a stock take meeting where you review progress, you have a really honest conversation. Is it working? Is it not working? If it's not working, what are we going to do about it? That kind of routine, relentlessly pursued, makes an enormous difference. And you can do routines in a number of ways, and it depends on the leader. But regular stock take meetings, as I call them, every couple of months on each of the key priorities is one thing. But also actually a monthly note to the leader, a note that says, here's the progress we've made in the last month, this is going well, this is going less well, where it's not going well, this is what we're doing about it, do you agree? All on one side of A4, such as I used to do for Blair. It makes an enormous difference, it just keeps the momentum going. Next lesson is problem solving. As you review progress of the implementation of your plan through the routines, you'll identify things that are going wrong. The question is, what are you going to do about it? And problems are interesting in this sense, because normally when something goes wrong in the government, the first question people ask is, who's to blame? The newspapers say, heads must roll. But actually, once you start asking that question, everybody stops talking, everybody starts getting their knives out and trying to knife other people in the back and mind their own backs. So the first question to ask is not who's to blame, but what are we going to do about it? If you solve the problem first, you may never need to allocate the blame, but if you do, you can leave it till later. But the really important point is, where you've got a problem, do something about it. Don't give the benefit of the doubt. Don't think it'll go away. Make sure that you've checked the nature of the problem and you've got somebody on the case focused on solving it. And then two other lessons then apply. One is, I call it irreversibility, seeing the thing through. There are so many government programs that are announced with a big fanfare, everybody gets very excited about it, and then after a year or two everybody gets bored, it goes away, nobody can remember what the impact was, and it's gone. And then you think, where did that 100 million or 200 million dollars, pounds, whatever the currency is, go? Irreversibility is about seeing it through so that it's actually embedded in the system, so that the results have changed for the better, so that the culture's changed so nobody wants to go back to how it was before, and the organisation has changed so the incentives are different, and so the incentives reinforce going forward as opposed to going back. And that takes, usually with a big change, some years. And then the final thing is about using public money effectively. You might remember in the Old Testament, Joseph, famous from a musical, The Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But what really is interesting about the Joseph story is this. The Pharaoh wakes up, he's had a dream that there are 7 fat cows in the dream and 7 thin cows, and he doesn't know what the dream means. And he asks all the courtiers, what does this mean? And they don't know, but they say there's this bloke in prison, Joseph. He's really good at dreams, and they drag Joseph from prison. They sling him on the floor in front of the Pharaoh, and he says, what does this mean? And Joseph says, it's very obvious what this means. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there's 7 years of famine. So you have to save 20% of the corn every year for those first 7 years, so that when the other 7 years come, you've got a store of grain, and everybody in Egypt will be okay. So what's this got to do with improving the education system? Look after the money carefully, think 7 or even 14 years out, don't waste money on programs, use it sparingly but effectively, check the progress against the data as Joseph did with the corn, and above all, make sure that the money is funding the things you really care about, the things that will make a difference to delivering outcomes. Too often in education systems, people spend vast sums of money on things that are very unlikely to make any difference to an outcome. So use money wisely is the final lesson. I hope that's been useful to you. Thank you very much for inviting me to join your conference. I hope you have a wonderful time.
Hi there, my name is Jenny Magera, and I'm here to talk to you about how we can empower our students, how we can give them the keys to their own educational journey so that they can drive their learning in your classroom. And while a lot of teachers would agree that this is a great thing to do with our students, it's also a really daunting task for us. I mean, it's a huge risk to give our kids that kind of power in our learning journeys. But we have to remember that risk is worth reward. And so I wanted to show you this quick clip of my students just a few days ago where I felt that reward in my own classroom.
So once the teachers is following us instead of we following them. Yeah.
I mean, look at this. Look at the smiles on their faces. Taylor is so geeked up about what she just saw. John Paul is literally throwing his hand up in the air in a high five, Kool-Aid man, oh yeah moment. They're thrilled with themselves. This is that edu nirvana that we're always shooting for as a teacher. And so we have to think, how can we get there? How can we have this and bottle it and have it every single day in our classrooms? And it didn't happen overnight for me. In fact, it took a really long journey, and I had to learn 3 really important lessons before I was able to get here. So I want to tell you a few stories about how I learned those lessons, and hopefully have you learn them to take back to your own learning environments. The first lesson that I needed to learn was how to cultivate curiosity. This is Jalen. You saw him in the last video. Now, he was always really excited about this little wind-up robot that I had on my desk. But being the fascist teacher I was, I never really let him play with it. One day I realized if I wanted to truly cultivate curiosity in my classroom, I had to open up and give my students more freedom to explore their own learning environment. So one day I walked in and declared it do whatever you want day, and immediately Jalen made a beeline to this little robot. So he brought the robot back to his desk, jumped on YouTube, and tried to figure out what made it tick. He wanted to make a giant life-size Jalen dancing robot. He emptied my drawers of all of the materials to build the robot and quickly realized I didn't have any of the motors or gears to build a wind-up toy. So he gave up. He decided that he wanted to do something different and put the robot back on my desk. I realized that the second lesson we had to learn was how to outwit obstacles. You see, if we wanted to be risk takers, we first had to be problem solvers. We couldn't give up the first time that we met a challenge. And so I took Jalen back to that desk, had him look at all the materials, and I said, what here will get you interactivity in your giant robot? And he realized that he had this roll of masking tape. He and his buddy John Paul realized that there was an entire wonderland of sticky interactivity that they had yet to explore. The boys were so excited about solving that challenge. But quickly, the excitement over the masking tape discovery lost its stickiness. And so we had to sit down and think about why were we building these robots? And so it came time for our third lesson. We had to learn how to play purposefully. Why were they so passionate about robotics? What was it that they were trying to achieve? And after just a little bit of play, they realized that what they really wanted wasn't a dancing life-size robot, but actually an automated army of minions to do their bidding. And so, as any good teacher would, I said, carry on, boys, let Judgment Day come. And so they began to build this Terminator army and realized that what they needed was to learn how to code. So I gave them resources like Made with Code and Scratch to investigate this language. Empowered students is an amazing thing. In fact, it can be addicting. It's the one drug that's okay to have in schools, student empowerment. And so our students began to expect it every single day. And this expectation led to more widespread empowerment. So I want to tell you one more story that leads us through those 3 lessons again that happened to me just a few months ago. You see, recently I was asked to give a keynote in California. And so when I told my students that I wasn't going to be there for school on Wednesday, they were upset and wanted to know why. I explained to them what a keynote was and what I'd be doing, and they were really curious. They couldn't believe that a group of adults would sit and watch someone talk at them for an hour. My students said, that is literally old school. They had begun to expect school to look more like what we'd been doing, to include curiosity, wit, playtime. They could not believe that someone would stand for a sit-and-get model of education. And so I had them dig deeper into that, and I asked them to tell me what to do. And so, as my students would, they began to boss me around.
Don't be boring.
Make sure you go to the bathroom before you have a speech, and make sure you don't pee on yourself.
Just throw out some words like bam, and then they all wake up and stuff like that. Surprise them like with a tough question to make them think.
Probably maybe have all the audience take a couple of selfies. Like,
You should not be looking off to the side.
Gravel Blatant, please come down for elite dismissal.
What?
Gravel Blatant, please come down for dismissal.
No! Miss McGarrett.
And because I'm really good at following directions, I did all of the things my kids asked me to do. But there was one challenge my kids were really hopeful that I would give the audience.
Honestly, make them get up and dance. That'd be funny.
My students were so excited about the idea of coming to California with me. They began to brainstorm ways to raise money for the plane tickets, to Bengali their parents into letting them go. But soon we realized that 48 hours is not enough time to prepare a cross-country field trip. But no worries, my students had learned to outwit obstacles. So they thought and they thought, and they realized that they could come to California with me, virtually. So they decided to figure out a way to create videos of themselves dancing to inspire the audience to get up and take their challenge. And it was time to play. They started to look for dance videos, practice their moves, break it down, until they found this one great video of the First Lady Michelle Obama dancing up a storm on Ellen. And they realized this was the perfect storm of dancing, fun, and inspiration to inspire the audience to take their challenge. So they filmed this video and sent it with me on the plane headed west. Now, this was a huge risk for my kids. They were going to be dancing virtually in front of a bunch of strangers. And it was a huge risk for me too. If I showed this video of my kids dancing, would everyone get up and dance along, or would they stare at me awkwardly from their seats? But I had learned from my kids it was okay to take a risk, and so we danced. Those smiles on the kids' faces, that statement that Taylor made, for once the teachers are following us instead of us following them, that's the magic sauce. That is the student empowerment, the reward that makes the risk all worth it. And that's also the moment that I learned the fourth secret lesson to risk-taking and student empowerment. Trust in ourselves, but most importantly, trust in our students. Because after all, one day our kids are all going to grow up and we're going to have to trust them with the future. So why not give them that trust now in the present when we're still here to guide them along the way? Thank you.